In a development sending ripples through the firearms community nationwide, the Supreme Court has issued an 8-1 emergency decision in a case directly challenging ATF authority, a ruling that could fundamentally alter how guns are legally transferred between ordinary Americans. And this isn't just about gun stores or dealers, it's about your right to hand a family heirloom to your own child without federal interference. What if a simple conversation with your father about inheriting his cherished shotgun suddenly required navigating a mandatory NICS background check run through a federally licensed FFL dealer, generating permanent paperwork, and carrying the constant worry of accidental violations with heavy fines or worse? Or imagine assisting a widowed relative in distributing estate firearms only to face unexpected requirements that turn a personal family matter into a legal minefield. These kinds of scenarios sit at the center of this ruling. Under the framework this ruling examines, even a family firearm gift could theoretically require a NICS background check run through a licensed dealer, a process critics argue criminalizes ordinary American family traditions. The dispute centers on how courts should interpret the Gun Control Act of 1968, specifically who counts as a gun dealer legally required to hold a federal license. The decision builds on the legal framework established in cases like Garland versus Cargill. It represents the court's most direct confrontation yet with the boundaries of executive agency power over firearms regulation. The ruling directly challenges ATF rulemaking authority that has governed licensed dealer requirements for decades, raising immediate questions about the Bureau's power to regulate private firearms transfers going forward. The implications stretch far and wide, potentially easing burdens in countless transactions while sparking fresh debates about the balance between public safety and individual rights. Yet, as significant as this near-unanimous outcome appears, it carries nuances that demand careful attention. The protective scope might not extend as broadly as initial celebrations suggest, with regulators already eyeing pathways to maintain influence and a lone dissent highlighting vulnerabilities that could shape future regulatory workarounds by a determined agency. Let's break down exactly what this ruling says, what it doesn't say, and why the fight is far from over.
ATF has arrested just over 8,700 criminals and seized nearly 44,000 illegal firearms.
This 8-1 emergency ruling emerged from a high-stakes clash over the very definition of what it means for a firearm to change hands under federal oversight. At its core, the case questioned how much latitude the ATF possesses to broaden the concept of a regulated transfer through enforcement practices and interpretive guidance, pulling in activities that many gun owners had long viewed as outside strict federal control. Challengers maintained that these expansions strayed beyond the boundaries set by long-standing statutes like the Gun Control Act of 1968. That is the half-century-old federal law that defines when a person is considered to be in the business of selling firearms and therefore required to obtain a federal license. Under current rules, any transfer routed through a federal firearms licensee, an FFL dealer, triggers mandatory paperwork and a NICS background check, a requirement this ruling now puts under direct legal scrutiny. These compliance demands exposed ordinary citizens to legal risks without clear congressional backing. And with lower courts offering inconsistent guidance and immediate pressures mounting on dealers and private individuals alike, the justices intervened swiftly in this emergency posture. 8 members of the court aligned to declare that the ATF's more aggressive stance overstepped its statutory limits and raised serious constitutional concerns under the framework built by recent Second Amendment precedents, effectively pausing the disputed policies while broader litigation unfolds. The decision does more than just hit pause. It crafts analytical tools for courts to scrutinize similar agency efforts moving ahead, making it substantially more challenging for regulators to achieve through indirect means what they cannot secure through explicit law.
Did you or your predecessor object to the finding?
It's a very technical, nuanced matter. If we were able to demonstrate the way they operate.
You're looking at the wrong criteria. It's the rate of fire. It's not the construction of the sear or it's a trigger effect.
Bringing this down to the level of daily existence for millions of gun owners reveals its true weight. Consider the father teaching his daughter responsible ownership by gifting a family heirloom rifle during a hunting season tradition, or the collector discreetly trading with a fellow enthusiast at a local range, interactions that under the challenged approach risked being reclassified as formal transfers demanding full federal processing including mandatory NICS checks and FFL dealer involvement. Widows settling estates or siblings dividing inherited collections found themselves entangled in rules that transformed straightforward, lawful steps into complex exercises fraught with potential criminal exposure for even minor oversights. The Supreme Court's intervention draws a firmer boundary, affirming that government authority in this area is genuine but confined by both the words Congress chose in the Gun Control Act of 1968 and deeper constitutional principles. It underscores that not every exchange between responsible adults needs to invite heavy-handed intervention, offering a measure of reassurance to those who have felt the creeping expansion of ATF requirements in recent years. This clarity arrives as a timely reminder that while transfers remain subject to oversight in certain contexts like commercial sales, the reach into purely private spheres faces meaningful constraints that protect core rights without undermining essential safeguards. The reasoning that supports this outcome weaves together several robust legal threads, each reinforcing the others to create a resilient foundation. One key element involves a direct, unfiltered examination of the statutory language itself, setting aside previous tendencies to defer to ATF interpretations and instead focusing strictly on what lawmakers actually enacted in the Gun Control Act. This revealed a more limited authorization for regulating transfers than what had been enforced in practice, providing standalone grounds to curb the specific actions at issue. Layered atop that is an application of the historical tradition analysis, an approach central to the framework established in cases like Garland versus Cargill, which probes whether early American legal practices included widespread mandates for government monitoring of private firearm exchanges among upright citizens. The inquiry turned up scant evidence of such a custom from the founding period, casting doubt on the constitutionality of broad modern impositions under established tests. Complementing these is the invocation of doctrines requiring explicit legislative approval for expansive regulatory programs that affect vast numbers of people and carry significant penalties, an element notably absent in the underlying framework, authorizing the ATF's actions. Together, these pillars not only resolve the immediate dispute, but also equip future cases with clearer standards to evaluate agency ambitions.
The Second Amendment extends prima facie to all instruments that constitute bearable arms, even those that were not in existence at the time of the founding.
That said, the picture remains incomplete without acknowledging the thoughtful opposition from the dissenting justice, whose opinion merits close study rather than quick dismissal. It contends that the majority may have interpreted the relevant laws too restrictively, overlooking aspects of legislative intent and historical context that could justify a wider net for ATF enforcement. The dissent warns of potential gaps this creates in efforts to trace and prevent illicit movements of firearms. It argues that the narrowed view undercuts practical tools, including the NICS background check system and FFL dealer oversight mechanisms, long relied upon without sufficient justification. Such points are poised to resurface in subsequent lawsuits, where advocates on both sides will dissect them to test the ruling's durability and application in varied factual settings. Adding further depth is a concurrence joined by two justices who endorsed the primary result but advocated for an even more assertive constitutional lens. They posited that frameworks imposing oversight on private transfers of items, shielded by the Second Amendment among non-prohibited individuals, should start from a presumption of invalidity, placing the full evidentiary weight on the government to demonstrate both statutory clarity and historical parallels. Should this viewpoint influence a future majority, it holds the potential to impose structural curbs on transfer regulations deeper than anything seen in decades, fundamentally tilting the field toward greater individual latitude in personal exchanges. This landmark 8-to-1 action slots neatly into an evolving judicial pattern of the post-Bruin era, where accumulated challenges are steadily exposing and trimming back areas of regulatory expansion lacking firm grounding. It echoes other notable decisions scrutinizing ATF classifications around accessories, components, and definitional stretches, including the reasoning at work in Garland versus Cargill, painting a consistent portrait of courts demanding stricter adherence to both statutory text and constitutional history. The near unanimity here delivers a potent signal that unchecked agency creativity in redefining court terms like who qualifies as an FFL. Dealer stands on increasingly unstable footing, with consequences likely to echo across related domains of firearms policy. For the average gun owner, whether navigating a private sale after years of uncertainty or simply planning ahead for family transfers, the ruling injects a dose of predictability and relief amid ongoing complexities. It highlights how these legal shifts translate into tangible freedoms while cautioning that vigilance remains essential as lower courts interpret and apply the new boundaries. Ultimately, this Supreme Court intervention blocks overbroad ATF policies governing gun ownership transfers, anchors itself in careful review of the Gun Control Act of 1968, historical inquiry, and major questions doctrine, and charts a course for more restrained governance in this space. The dissenting arguments will fuel continued litigation around NICS requirements and FL dealer mandates that owners and advocates must track closely. Meanwhile, the concurring perspective opens intriguing doors for broader protections if embraced by a future majority. In the wider view, it reflects a judiciary increasingly willing to enforce limits on administrative reach, fostering an environment where constitutional rights receive more robust defense through case-by-case scrutiny. As developments unfold in the coming months, staying attuned to these shifts will empower gun owners to engage confidently with the evolving rules that govern their lawful activities, ensuring that personal freedoms and public responsibilities find a more balanced equilibrium.